Yeah. So anyway, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. So I'm the kind of the CEO of a growth agency. It's called Spades Media. Spades Media as an agency has been around since 2012. But my roots in media buying go back to 1999. So this is I guess my 21st year of buying media. In that time, I've actually spent in excess of 280 million US dollars. I don't know what that is in Turkish lira, but it's a lot. And in that time, I've also generated for the e-commerce clients that I've worked with about $1.6 billion in revenue. And I've also generated about 2.5 million leads for the clients that we've worked with. So I've been involved in programmatic media since 2009. That's really kind of when the origins of programmatic media started. But just a kind of final point on me, I'm a big fan of performance-based marketing. It's something that, you know, I've been involved in affiliate marketing for a long time. And most of the clients that I work with now, we work on a performance basis. So we don't get results, we don't get paid. So I'm very keen to kind of work with people that can, you know, I can add value to and they can add value to me. But I want to kind of walk you back to kind of 2009 when I mentioned that was the kind of my origins into programmatic media. So I actually at the time I owned an affiliate network. It was called Global Direct Media, and in February of 2000, or January 2009, I actually sold my agency to a company called Unanimous. And Unanimous were an ad sales house, and they represented big publishers, so people that had big sites, lots of traffic, and what they were responsible for doing is they were responsible for selling the traffic on those sites. And obviously this was all done through salespeople. It was done like with faxes. Everything had to be done on an insertion order, had to be faxed. So it was very, very archaic. And the reason that I sold my agency to them was I wanted to take advantage. One of the big sort of channels for us in terms of traffic was the display ad side of things. And for me, they had a huge amount of inventory available that we were able to kind of capitalize on. So it was a really good win-win situation. What was really interesting, though, is that at the time, if you look at this sort of slide, you can see on the right-hand side, you've got the publishers. So this is the people that own the websites. And on the left-hand side, you've got the people that are looking to buy the traffic. And that was really the ecosystem that existed back in 2009. But then if you kind of look then what happened is this huge ecosystem kind of sprouted up. You had agencies, trading desks, DSPs. You had what they called yield optimizers, people that worked on the publisher side of things to help people make the most money from the inventory that they had. You had performance networks, data suppliers, ad servers, huge ecosystem. And the thing that you obviously sort of had to look at is that there was no way on this earth that ecosystem could be supported using the methods that kind of applied in 2009. So what you found was that there was this sort of introduction of programmatic advertising at that time. And in terms of by way of a definition, so programmatic advertising is the process of automating the buying and selling of ad inventory in real time through an automated bidding system. So the value of an impression is going to be different from one sort of site, one advertiser to another. And the idea behind programmatic advertising is it's really just a kind of way of, rather than you having to kind of find a way to do this manually, you can actually use technology to kind of do more with it. So let me talk to you a little bit about what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to kind of whip through this fairly quickly. I know that obviously we've got a limited amount of time, and I've got a lot to kind of get through. So we're going to be talking a little bit about what the sources of programmatic are. We're going to be talking a little bit about why programmatic is experiencing such a kind of rapid growth at this particular point, what your options are in respect of buying programmatic advertising, where the opportunities that exist are, what the challenges for buying it are, what ad types you've got. We're going to look at a little bit about some of the tools that we've got available. And then hopefully at the end, again, obviously with Big Market, we've got the questions. If you have any questions, feel free to kind of stick them in, and I'll if we have time at the end, I'll go through as many of them as I can. And any that I don't answer, kind of on this presentation. What I'll make sure is I take the opportunity to answer them kind of later on, so that that Zio can kind of like make sure that whoever asks the questions will get the answer to what they're looking for. So at this point in time, I'd be looking for some form of confirmation from the audience that all kind of looks okay and sounds okay. So I'll just work on the basis that that's okay. So we'll just kind of crack on. So let's talk a little bit about what the sources that are classed as programmatic are. Now, again, whenever I talk to people and I talk about programmatic, they all say, oh, I don't do any programmatic advertising. And the reality of it is that virtually every single person that buys media will be buying media, right, programmatically. They just don't understand that that's the model that they're using. So let's talk a little bit about what that ecosystem looks like. So the ecosystem, again, this is sort of 2019 to 2022, and it is only the US. And I know that obviously a lot of the people on the kind of call today will be from Turkey and sort of Europe, right? But for me, I think it's something that you know, it's a fair kind of barometer that what's happening in the US is likely to be reflected of what's going on in Europe as well. So what you tend to find is that you'll see you've got the percentage of the digital display ad spend, the percentage change, and the percentage of total digital display ads. And you can see here that the percentage total in 2019 is about 84%. And that's going to be rising in the next 3 years to about 88%. And the amount of money being spent is going to go from about $60 billion to about $95 billion. So it's a significant amount. And a lot of people think, wow, that seems to be an awful lot, right? But as you can see there, the definition, it includes native ads, ads on social networks like Facebook and Twitter, right? The only thing it doesn't cover is it doesn't cover Google search ads, but it does cover some of the Google ecosystem. So as I mentioned, it's obviously Google and Facebook. They're both they're both deemed to be sort of programmatic advertising by way of the definition of you buy advertising programmatically by way of a kind of like that automated process, the kind of the real-time bid automation. So at the moment, like I think it's safe to say that Facebook and Google have had like a duopoly. So they've been the kind of dominant players. What you're seeing now is that Amazon is starting to kind of get more involved in the programmatic media space. So their market share has gone from about 7.5% up to about 8.5%. And I think it's safe to say that that's only going to increase over time. So you could say that between those three, they have about 70% of the market cornered, and then there's another 30%. And we actually spend a fair amount of time, like on a day-to-day basis, in that other 30%, but we also do a lot in the sort of the 70% that makes up Facebook, Amazon, and Google. So in terms of, you know, why is there this kind of growth that's taking place at the moment, right? Because again, I think it's safe to say that that, you know, it's one of the areas where there is definitely growth taking place. And I think part of the reason for that is it's driven by mobile. So I think when you look at it across most industries, 78% of online purchases that we're seeing are happening on mobile devices. But I think more importantly, you know, clearly you'd have to be living under a rock to kind of realize that there's a pandemic going on at the moment. And this is changing a lot of people's behaviors, buying behaviors, online behaviors. And it's, I think, as much as once the pandemic is finished, right, and we all hope that happens, but I think it's safe to say that some of the kind of the behaviors that people will have developed in this period now are likely to continue kind of like for the longer term. So if you look here at this next slide, you can see that it took 10 years to go from 5.6% of total market, total sales online being done through online, up to 16%. So it took 10 years to get to that point. And just in the last 2 months, right, so from sort of February through to April, they went from 16% of total sales to 27%. And I know you might think, well, that's not likely to be a sort of true reflection, but it's definitely sort of a reflection of the fact that, you know, a lot of places have been shut down, and there's, you know, some of them may well go out of business. And I think a lot of businesses are realizing the value and benefit of switching some of their offline activity into online activity. So I think it's safe to say that that's only going to fuel the activity of advertisers spending money on media for the foreseeable future. So if that's kind of what the ecosystem looks like, what are the options that you have in respect of buying, right? So the one thing I would say, I mean, this actually was a sort of a video slide, which doesn't really kind of do true reflection, but it's basically a driverless Tesla car, right, that goes about 70 miles an hour along the motorway. So I think for me, it's really kind of like if you imagine if you were the person sitting in the driving seat of this car, you'd be so tempted to just put your hands on the wheel and steer the car. But the whole idea is that it uses machine learning algorithms and technology to decide where to go, what to do, what not to do. And by virtue of that, the kind of number of crashes that driverless cars have been so few. And I think for me, I think as much as we are people involved in media buying typically are control freaks. And for me, one of the biggest challenges that we've had to kind of deal with is we've had to kind of deal with trusting the machine learning, the algorithms, the artificial intelligence that the companies that we buy media from have developed, and lean into it kind of instead of leaning out and having kind of doubts about it. So in respect to Google, I mean, I mentioned that obviously Google was one of those platforms that has traffic. So they have obviously responsive search ads, Google Display Network, so they have responsive search there. You have shopping campaigns and you have smart shopping campaigns where Google make all the decisions. You've got YouTube where a lot of the kind of decision making is based upon you set up a budget and they'll kind of work out what to do, which videos to kind of show your ads against. And then obviously remarketing, you have the ability to do dynamic remarketing. And again, that can be bought in a programmatic way. When it comes to the Facebook ecosystem, I mean, I sort of have an iPad and I was sort of doodling away, and it became abundantly clear to me when I was going through this exercise that it's impossible for anyone that buys media on Facebook to do it without leaning into the technology that Facebook has available. So if you look here, you've got the 4 sources. You've got Facebook, Instagram, Audience Network, Messenger. You've got 2 types of buying, so auction-based and reach and frequency. That's more for sort of brand awareness. You've got the campaign objectives of awareness, consideration, and conversion. Awareness being, you know, people like at the top of the funnel, consideration, medium funnel, conversion, bottom of the funnel. Then we have on the sort of the awareness side, you dive into that. You've got brand awareness and reach. Consideration side, you've got 6 types of consideration. So traffic, engagement, app installs, video views, lead generation, and messages. You've got conversions. You've got sort of micro and macro conversions. So you could say a big conversion could be somebody fills in a form. Somebody makes a purchase. A small conversion could be somebody signs up for your newsletter, or somebody adds a product to the cart, something like that. So, and then obviously store traffic is where you're driving sort of people from the offline world, or so the online world into the offline world. And then you have catalog sales. And then when it comes to sort of the campaign structure, what you have is you'll obviously have the, you know, in terms of the choices that you have, you've got the buying type, the objectives, whether you use campaign budget optimization or not. You've got the budget, so you can choose whether you want to have a daily budget or a kind of a total budget. You've got the bid strategy that you have, the ad schedule. You've got on the ad set side of things, there are 4 conversion event locations, and those are kind of like website conversion, Facebook activity, Messenger, and WhatsApp, right? And then you've got 17 conversion events. Then you've got dynamic creative. And I apologize for going like super quick, but there's so much to kind of get through. So you've got dynamic creative, budget and schedule, audiences for inclusion, audiences for exclusion, the location, the age, the gender, the targeting, the languages, the connections. So that's whether they're connected to your Facebook page or not. You've got the placements. So again, on this sort of placement side of things, I think there's about 14 different placements that you can choose. You've got the conversion window. Then on the ad side of things, you've got the identity, the ad type, the existing post, whether you want to use that or not, whether you're going to use a creative with dynamic or carousel or video or image, primary text. So that's the kind of the text that sits above the image, or the carousel. You've got the headline that sits below the description, the URL or event that you're kind of choosing, the display link. So you can, again, some of these are kind of optional. You can choose to use them or not use them. You've got the call to action, the language. So I think it's fairly safe to say that the likelihood of you actually kind of doing anything with this particular kind of ecosystem manually is almost impossible, right? And I think I see so many people on Facebook complain about the results that they get from Facebook ads, running Facebook ads. They say it's so volatile, so difficult, right? And the reason for that is because they're trying to kind of control. It's almost like they're sort of strapped themselves onto a bucking bronco and they're trying to hold on for the ride, and it's virtually impossible for you to do that. So what we've done, and we've done this for quite a while, is we've leaned into something called the Power 5. Now, this is basically Facebook's way of dumbing everything down to these 5 things. So you've got auto advanced matching. So it's basically saying, if you want to create a lookalike audience, they will automatically match up first names, last names, email addresses, zip codes, phone numbers, things like that. Because obviously not everyone uses the same email address for their Facebook account. So if you just use email, you wouldn't get a good match. You have account simplification. So rather than you having, hundreds of campaigns, hundreds of ad groups, hundreds of ads, they sort of split it down and try and keep the accounts as simple as possible. They urge you to use campaign budget optimization, right? So basically, rather than you controlling what, so let's say you have a $10,000 a day budget that you want to have, right? And you have 10 ad sets, rather than you having to choose where that budget gets split, Facebook will actually automatically send the budget to the campaigns that give the best results. Then you have automatic placements. So again, I think I see a lot of people they always say, oh, the audience network doesn't work for me, so I'm just going to switch it off. And with us, we actually say, we'd much rather have the automatic placements switched on, which includes everything. And what we're able to do is we're able to kind of see at a kind of granular level which placements give us the best results. And if we don't like some of those sources on the audience network, we can actually exclude them. And then finally, dynamic ads. So I think, again, one of the things that people kind of complain about is this kind of ad fatigue. People keep seeing the same ads and they eventually start complaining about them and hiding them, right? Whereas if you use dynamic ads and you've got, five headlines, five titles, descriptions, then you're in a much stronger position because there's less likelihood of there being that banner fatigue. So let's talk about where the opportunities that exist are. So I would probably suggest there's probably 4 areas that I would say are really strong for 2020 and beyond. And the first of those is native ads. And for me, the thing I like about native ads is they don't look like ads, right? And I know that a lot of people have probably been exposed to Taboola, Outbrain. Those are sort of the 2 native exchanges that most people are aware of. But there's a lot of inventory kind of over and above those 2. And the idea behind native ads is the ads, you just provide the kind of the raw assets, and what the platform will do is they will create the ad and change the font and color scheme to match the actual placement that the ad is going on to make it a much better user experience. So definitely we're seeing native ads as being a big growth area. It's definitely something where there's a lot more traffic opportunities for that. All right. And it's a great way of getting the kind of first party data. So the next one is remarketing. Again, for us, it's sort of like one of the things we always make sure we do is whenever we kind of work with the client, we put in place a sort of tracking and tagging solution to cover all platforms. Because even though people might say, well, my audience is not on Snapchat, or my audience is not on Pinterest, or my audience is not on TikTok, or wherever, right? We always suggest that we might think that's the case, but the reality of it is that your audience will choose where they want to go. And for us, if we're using kind of remarketing campaigns for people who have been to your site and didn't buy, right, then that's again, for us, that's probably one of the lowest hanging fruit opportunities that exist. And it's not that difficult to kind of set up campaigns on Snapchat, on Pinterest, right? So we would always suggest that people cover that base, even if they decide not to do any cold traffic on those platforms. Then we would definitely suggest if you pick up remarketing, you'll get really, really good results. The next thing is first party data. So again, you'd have to be living in a bubble to realize that there are lots and lots of developments and changes happening at the moment. So iOS are coming out with Big Sur. They've got a kind of a new iOS 14. Chrome are kind of doing away with cookies in the next couple of years. So I think it's safe to say that the days of third-party data availability are going away. So it's more important than ever that you build up your audience of first-party data as best you can. And I see a lot of people spend a ton of money on Facebook trying to build up a first-party data audience by trying to get people from Facebook through to their site. And they're paying CPM rates of, like $10, $15, $20 CPM, right? When the reality of it is that there's a huge amount of really, really cheap traffic available that you can kind of create your audience kind of elsewhere, and then bring it into Facebook or then bring it into Google. So that for me, there's definitely some opportunities for you to kind of to really kind of build a significant first-party data pool. And then once it's a first-party data pool, that basically means it's your data. You own it. You can then decide what you do with it. Whereas if it's third-party data, they're putting restrictions in terms of what you're able to do because of that. So as I mentioned, like you can see here up at the top that you've got the CPM rate. So when we buy media kind of externally, we buy and we pay $1 CPM kind of override on the actual cost of the media. So if we're paying, say, $4 CPM for the actual traffic, we will pay $1 override to be able to kind of layer in this additional kind of filtering. So in this case, we're using a platform called PushSpring. What we're able to do is we're able to kind of look at things like on-demand food delivery, which is obviously a big thing at the moment. So you've got Uber Eats, Grubhub, and stuff like that. What we're able to do is we can see the age range of the people that are doing this, the genders, the household income. But most importantly, you can see here on this slide that the IDFA, which is the kind of the mobile device identifier that iOS has, that's gone away, right? So that's not something that we have available anymore, right? Because of this, the kind of the update in the Apple sort of ecosystem. But you can see here that in our case, this is the platform that we use. It's called Centro, which is great. And the idea behind this is that we're able to kind of send the information. So we can build audiences in a platform like PushSpring. And what we're then able to do is we can send it to partners that we work with. So in this case, you can see I've circled Centro, but we can also send it to Instagram and Facebook. We can send it to Snapchat. We can send it to Twitter. And we can send it to any of these other platforms. So Spotify, we decided that we wanted to do audio ads. We could send that audience to Spotify as well. And then finally, this is one of those, it's quite an interesting one. So in the US, it's become not necessarily nationally, but fairly close to nationally, that CBD and cannabis is now kind of readily available. And there's been this kind of big growth in CBD and cannabis advertising opportunities. And initially, when this sort of first started, there was no marketplace for this. But you can see here, this is the the kind of the inventory for cannabis-based vertical traffic. And you can see there that the first column says ROE, which is run of exchange, cannabis CBD, and there was 968 million impressions yesterday on that particular vendor with that exchange. So there's a huge amount of inventory available for cannabis advertising. And again, I'm not sure what the rules of the game are where you're based, but it's definitely something I'm seeing a lot more people wanting to get into cannabis advertising. And there's definitely a kind of an ecosystem that's been built on the back of that demand. So let's look a little bit about what some of the challenges are. This is another good thing about doing one of these events. I can actually take a cup of tea and have a drink working from home. It's one of the benefits of it. So let's look at what some of the challenges are. So for me, I think there's definitely a volatile auction condition. So like I said, I see so many of my friends spending a huge amount of time complaining about the volatility in the Facebook auction system, right? And I think for me, that's something that is only going to continue. And if anything, it may well get worse. So I think that's something you just have to kind of accept. That's table stakes for playing in the pond. And if you don't want to play in the pond, then kind of get out the pond. As I mentioned, cookies are going away. Third-party data is definitely going to be less available. There's probably a lack of understanding about some of the options that you have. So like I said, I think a lot of people just made the assumption that the data that they were getting beautifully from Facebook previously was taken away and that was it gone. The reality of it is that the data's still there, right? So the sources that were providing it to Facebook as part of their partnership, they're still providing that data, but there's an extra layer of complexity into the ecosystem to enable people to kind of buy those types of placements, right? So for me, it's just really a case of understanding what those options are and how you can kind of get around them. And then finally, I think probably, again, I've been involved 21 years in this industry, and the challenge has always been there's never been enough people with experience in the ecosystem from a recruitment side of things to kind of do the work, right? And for me, certainly on the programmatic side of things, there's definitely, it's more of a kind of ad operations role that you have to kind of fulfill, right? And there's definitely a kind of a thin pool of resource available in that, and I'm trying to kind of do my bit to try and sort of increase that pool if I can. And probably finally that the other thing to kind of note is that it's very, very hard to understand some of the performance, and I put performance in inverted commas, metrics that exist, right? And things like view through conversions, right? So for me, you know, we see a lot of conversions that take place where people have maybe started their journey on Google, and then they've gone off to some random kind of game to play the game. Like it could be a word game, or it could be a puzzle game, or Sudoku or something like that. And they obviously leave the kind of the confines of the Google ecosystem, and they find themselves in a game. Now they may well click on that ad that they see, but because there is no cookie on the app, because it's kind of like an SDK rather than a cookie, right? There is no kind of join between those two things taking place, right? So what you're seeing is that we know that a kind of a conversion took place, right? But Google will kind of claim the credit for that conversion because they saw the click, right? So the kind of the ad or the app will not get the credit that it's due, but we can actually see in our platform that a view through conversion took place. So we know that somebody kind of routed through that app through to a conversion, because we've obviously got the conversion pixel in place. So we're able to kind of give credit for that. Then you have what they call viewable impressions. So one of the biggest challenges you have is if you're buying media on a CPM basis, you're paying for every impression. And with Facebook, you buy traffic on a CPM basis, right? So what tends to happen is if you have a placement that's right at the very bottom of a page, or you got one of these infinite scrolling pages, you'll be paying for impressions that you don't actually, where people don't physically see the ad at all, right? So what you're able to do is you're able to kind of say, right, I only want to buy viewable impressions. So the impression has to be in view for a certain amount of time before you actually get charged for that. But obviously that comes kind of at a greater cost. So you can actually buy above the fold or below the fold, or just say, I'm just happy to take whatever. So let's talk a little bit about what are the ad types that you have available to buy. So again, huge amount of opportunity and options that you have. So again, I'm kind of doing these in order of what I see to be the most important, right? So native ads is definitely one where it's probably the lowest barrier to entry, because you don't necessarily need to have complex ad formats. You just need images, you need logos, and you need words, and that's it. Then you have video. And again, I think a lot of people are doing sort of TV advertising, and they can kind of repurpose their video ads for that. If they're doing YouTube advertising, they can kind of extend the footprint that their video ads have, right? And some of the kind of the rules that you would have in terms of, you know, switching things around to put your information at the beginning. So obviously with the YouTube ecosystem, there's differences in terms of, you know, when you should actually have your call to action, you know, because of the fact that you don't pay for impressions if people don't watch 30 seconds. So when people, you know, in the first 5 seconds, they click skip ad, you don't get charged for that. But obviously on the kind of programmatic side of things, video media is different than in that respect. You have what they call connected TV, right? So I think a lot more people have got smart TVs. And this is definitely something where I think this is definitely where you know, people are not going to necessarily click on an ad on a smart TV, but if they see the ad, they may well be sitting with their phone in their lap or their iPad in their lap or something like that. They may well go and do a kind of a brand search at that point, right? And that's where I think advertising on connected TV will be very, very powerful. We're seeing a lot more rich media. So again, like the days of just sort of your standard banners, right? Your sort of plain static banners, they're gone. And what we're finding now is that a lot more people are interacting with ads where there is a rich media element. And I've got a tool that I'll kind of show you in a second to kind of explain how that works. You have audio ads. Again, like more and more people are now listening to audio. They're listening to podcasts. Right. And there's definitely an opportunity in places like Spotify, in SoundCloud, where there's a huge advertising opportunity. And what you're able to do is you're able to kind of create a banner, or you can create your kind of audio ad. Right. And then, you know, and honestly, you can go to somewhere like Fiverr.com and get a kind of an audio ad made for next to no money at all. Right. So you don't have to get James Earl Jones or Morgan Freeman to kind of do the audio for your ad. You can kind of just get anyone to kind of do it. You you know, and then what you'll also get is you'll get like a companion banner to go with that. So again, audio is one of those. It's a growing opportunity, and we'll probably see audio move more towards the top of this as we kind of move into next year. So podcasts, definitely more and more people are listening to podcasts as a way of sort of killing time. And then finally, we have sort of standard banner ads. In terms of tools, I'm going to talk to you a little bit. Sorry about that. Should have unplugged my phone. Yeah, so in terms of what tools you have available, there are lots and lots of tools. I mean, we spend an absolute crap ton of money on tools on a monthly basis. And for us, it's kind of like, again, table stakes. We need to kind of spend the money in order to get the results. So as I mentioned, Centro is the platform that we've chosen to kind of throw our sort of hat into the ring with. There's a tool called Adicado. I've got some screenshots that I'll show you in a second for those. AdBeat, which is kind of like a kind of spying tool for you to be able to see what your competitors are doing by way of ads. AirTory, which is the rich media platform that I mentioned, and Bannersnap, which is a kind of tool for creating banners. So this is Adicado. So the idea behind Adicado is if you're an e-commerce business, you're able to kind of upload your data feed to this platform, and what they will do is they will create sort of you know, theme-based ads. So they'll do all the different ad sizes, and that will be based on product name, SKU, pricing, and all that sort of stuff. So you can create banner ads for dynamic products very, very easily with Adicado. I mentioned AdBeat. So AdBeat is a kind of tool where you can actually look historically. So that here we're looking at the sort of the last 30 days for Shopify. So we can see that they've had 736 ads, right? And that they're running 7 fewer ads this month than last month. We can see that 99% of Shopify's advertising has been programmatic. We can see the creatives by size. We can see the creatives by type. So you can see that 83% of their ads have been image-based. They ran on 3,817 publishers. We can see that their longest running ad has been running for 327 days. And if you think about it, I mean, if you are running ads and you're running them for almost a year, you're either a really, really stupid advertiser, or those ads are getting you good results. And I would probably say in this case, they are getting good results. Excuse me. Yeah, so you can see here, standard ads, native ads, video ads. They've got landing pages, huge amount of information available through AdBeat. And you can see there's a link there at the bottom that will take you to AdBeat's page. Excuse me. So this is mobile ads. So this is an AirTory example. So rather than just having sort of your standard 300 by 250 banners, what AirTory does is they provide kind of ads that are much more, they're rich media, they're more interactive, right? And they have a lot of, like, you know, scratch to reveal and things like that. So again, the idea behind banners is you want to try as best you can, because you're paying for impressions, ultimately what you want people to do is to click on the ad to go through to your site. So once they're in your site, you can cookie them, and then they become part of the kind of ecosystem that you have built up on your site. But unless they click on the ad, you're going to be paying for ads that are not getting impressions. That you'll pay for impressions, but you're not getting the clicks. So using rich media ads is what gives you the way to kind of to do better in terms of getting a click-through rate. And we've seen in some cases like 7 times the sort of click-through rate from rich media ads versus standard banners, right? Which is massive, right? It makes a huge, huge difference to the results. So this is an example here where you can see this is an AirTory ad build guide, where they're talking about email capture. So the actual ad itself has got an email capture, so you don't have to send them off to a site. You can capture emails directly in the banner. And it's a sort of 970 by 250. You've got the format for the use cases and industries, and then the kind of how you actually sort of set that up. And they they have probably, I think, 250 different ad formats for mobile, for video, for desktop. So again, huge amount of opportunity there. I actually did a kind of an hour-long kind of walkthrough of the AirTory platform with Julian Frackman, who's the CEO of the company. where we were talking about learning why rich media ads are the missing link for media buys. And I think that the link there is that you, if you go to that, you can kind of just see what Julian and I had to kind of talk about. Again, very, very kind of insightful information in that. And then finally, we've got Bannersnack, and Bannersnack is what they call the original online banner maker. So again, I'm not a designer, and I don't want to. I mean, I have designers that I have available to me, but you know, for me, sometimes it's more a case of I just want to kind of you know, get something rough and ready up and see how it performs, and then refine it over time, rather than spending a huge amount of time, effort, and money building banners and then finding we need to change them. So using something like Bannersnack gives us the ability to create banners quickly, so we can create sort of choose the assets, and it will create all the different sort of ad formats for us sort of automatically. And then obviously we can kind of use those, run them for a period of time, and then maybe change the colors or change the call to action or change the color of the buttons. And again, it's much, much easier to kind of do that if you use a sort of third-party tool to kind of do that, rather than having to kind of use a designer, because designers tend to be slower and they tend to be more expensive if you kind of use that. So this was what we were going to be covering today, and hopefully we've kind of covered that. I think we've got a few minutes left for maybe some questions at the end. I'll kind of go through and see what questions there are. And if you wanted to kind of reach out to me, here's my contact details. I have nothing but kind of respect for this industry. It's been great to me for the last 21 years. I'm trying to help out as best I can. A sort of small plug here. I have a portal called EliteMediaBuyers.com. It's a portal. There's also a Facebook group where I'm trying to help the next generation of media buyers become like get into it if they're not doing it already, or kind of get better skills to kind of learn things that they don't learn at the moment. And with that, I will say that is the end of my presentation. So let me just turn. There she is.
Hello again. Thank you so much. It was very lovely.
Thank you.
Actually, we have a few questions and a few minutes.
Yeah.
Do you want me to read the questions to you, or you can just read them and answer?
Let me see. So
I can read them for the guests as well.
Yeah.
The first question from Utku. Hi, Jim. We determine the performance of different marketing channels using Google Analytics. And for Google Analytics, Facebook and Instagram performance are very poor, in contrast with Facebook's own reports. How do you analyze performance data for different channels altogether?
Yeah, so this is obviously one of those challenges where, you know, the issue that you've got is because of attribution, right? I mean, the Facebook pixel, the Google pixel is on every page, right? So if Facebook have been involved in a conversion, Facebook are going to claim credit for that conversion, right? In the same way that if Google have been involved in the conversion, they're going to claim credit. If SEO has been involved, they're going to claim credit. So somewhere along the way, you know, you've got this sort of attribution kind of fight that's taking place. And for us, I mean, we always look at it in a simplistic way. There's the money that leaves your bank by virtue of the ads that you spend money on, right? And you've got the money that hits your bank from the sales that you make. And somewhere along the way, you need to make a decision in terms of where you're going to give the relevant credit. Now, it becomes slightly more complicated because, you know, in a lot of cases, you'll be, you know, like I said, if you have an internal team, so let's say you have an internal SEO team or email team, right? They will all want to claim credit for the sales because that's ultimately going to dictate their success within the business, right? But I think what you need to try and do is have an attribution model. And again, I think Facebook have a kind of data-driven attribution model. Google has a data-driven attribution model. And the more you can kind of move towards that sort of attribution model where the kind of the value that a particular touch point in the journey has added to the overall conversion success, right? But this is where I think the combination of man and machine can really come together, because, you know, all you end up with in analytics and Google and Facebook is huge amounts of raw data, and you need to have people that can interpret that data and then make a decision to say, I'm going to spend more money on this and less money on this. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you so much. In parallel that question, our next one is, what are the limitations of programmatic media buying in means of budget and time? I mean, what's the minimum budget and time to advertise on programmatic to have meaningful results?
Yeah, so again, what we tend to do in sort of our world is we're always kind of, you know, I think a lot of people try and you know, hit the thing as hard as they can right from the get-go. What we tend to do is we'll try and isolate things in a really sort of small level. So we have huge amounts of contextual partners that we can work with. There's lots of audiences that they've created. And what we'll try and do is we'll try and sort of put a small budget. And for us, I mean, we've got some campaigns where we can run sort of $5, $10 a day, right, to actually just test out a hypothesis that we might have, right? So we'll test it. If it works well, we'll throw more money at it. If it doesn't work well, we'll just stop it and move on to something else, right? But for me, I think it's really just a case of, you know, I always kind of work on the basis of, you know, I always kind of say, whatever your conversion goal is. So like if your goal is, say, you know, I can make money if I get sales for $50, right? I always kind of work on the basis that I will spend up to 2 times that money, right, before I actually say, you know what, this isn't working, right? So I will spend $100, and if I get no sales at all, I go, right, okay, I'll move on and try something else, right? Whereas I think a lot of people will just assume that, you know, they can spend $400 and it will start to get better, and it just tends not to, right? You can usually kind of tell on a small amount of data that things have gone okay, and if they go okay, then you can start to slowly scale things up. I mean, again, I see a lot of people, they go from spending $10 a day to $1,000, and it just doesn't work that way. You have to kind of incrementally walk it up rather than just go crazy and sort of you know, hit it really hard.
Okay, thank you so much. And our next question is a little bit about Turkey as well. First of all, thanks for such a good presentation. My question is how to convince marketing managers to use the budget for digital branding channels like native or video, because they are not eager to use budget outside of TV, mostly in Turkey, because they don't see the results directly, like transaction or revenue.
Yeah, I mean that's again, thank you for the feedback on the presentation, and it's a great question. Again, I think it's very difficult because of the complexities, as I mentioned, of this. You know, the fact that there is no cookie on a TV ad, right? You have to use other data to kind of like dictate whether things work, right? So again, if you're running TV ads, right, what we normally would look for is we'd look for, you know, what was the performance of things before the TV ad, and then the period that the TV ad was running. So let's say you ran the ad, you know, we would look for maybe a 15 to 30-minute window after the TV ad, right? And we would look for other signals. So we would look for kind of like brand uplift, kind of in terms of clicks on brand campaigns on Google, right? Or a kind of an uplift in Facebook ads. The most important thing is whatever you're doing, whatever media you're buying, right? Whether you're including TV or not, you need to kind of join the dots between all of those different channels, right? Because they all kind of work collaboratively, right? And the thing is, if you only have TV running on its own, and then you have a completely different strategy for Google and a completely different strategy for Facebook, you're going to be missing out on the opportunity of joining the dots. Because, like I said, more and more people are using kind of multiple devices to kind of do their research for things. Again, I'm sitting here, I've got a computer, I've got an iPad, I've got my phone, I've got another desktop, I've got so many devices, right, that depending on where I am in the house will dictate what I actually do with it, right? And again, I think the beauty of it, Facebook, Google, because they have such massive penetration, is they are probably, you know, every single device I have, I'm logged in on Google and I'm logged in on Facebook. So they know if I switch from one device to another, they know it's still me, right? And I think that's where, you know, you can use the data that you get from your TV advertising in conjunction with the data that you get from other channels to kind of formulate a kind of a strategy for how success looks. And I don't think you should just be looking at just the pure, I spent $1,000 and I got no conversion, so therefore it didn't work.
Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation, for being here with us today, for all the useful tips and information.
That's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and hopefully we can do this in real life in Istanbul sometime in the future.
Yeah, we wish you were here as well, but maybe next time.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.